The first time Jenna saw the farmhouse, it was bathed in twilight. Perched at the edge of the woods, it looked like a relic from another world, its windows boarded, its roof sagging, and a silence so profound it seemed to hum. She shivered despite the warm summer air. "This is where it happened," said Eric, hushly. Jenna turned to her brother, whose face was as pale as the fading daylight. What happened?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "The attacks," Eric said, his voice almost reverent. "This is where they found the bodies." Jenna rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. You don't seriously believe that, do you?" Eric's gaze didn't waver from the house. "Believe what?" "The whole vampire and werewolf thing," Jenna said, folding her arms. "It's just an urban legend." Eric turned to her, his eyes dark and solemn. "You've read the stories. You've seen the pictures. How do you explain that?" Jenna didn't have an answer. She had read the stories, about the bodies torn apart in ways no human could manage, about the eerie lack of blood, about the strange claw marks no one could identify. And she had seen the pictures grainy and blurred but chilling nonetheless. Still, she wasn't about to admit that to Eric. "Let's just get this over with," she said, brushing past him toward the house. The old wooden door creaked ominously as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale and thick, carrying the faint scent of decay. The floorboards groaned under their weight as they stepped inside. Eric had insisted they bring flashlights, but even the beams of light felt feeble against the oppressive darkness. "Do you feel that?" Eric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jenna nodded. The air seemed charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They moved through the house in silence, their flashlights sweeping across walls covered in peeling wallpaper and furniture draped in dusty sheets. In the kitchen, Jenna's beam landed on a series of scratches etched into the wooden table. They were deep and jagged, as though made by claws. "Eric," she whispered, pointing to the table. He came over, his brow furrowing as he studied the marks. "What could have done that?" he murmured. Before Jenna could respond, a sound echoed through the house. It was faint at first, like the rustle of leaves, but it grew louder and more distinct. It was footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps. "Someone's here," Eric said, his voice tight with fear. Jenna shook her head. "No one's been here for years." But the footsteps were undeniable, moving closer with every second. Jenna's heart hammered in her chest as she and Eric backed toward the kitchen door. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. And then they heard it, a low, guttural growl. Jenna's flashlight beam jerked upward, catching a flash of movement in the doorway. Something stood there, its form hulking and shadowy. Eyes glinted in the darkness, a deep, unholy red. The growl deepened, resonating through the air like a warning. "Run!" Eric shouted, grabbing Jenna's arm. They bolted through the house, the creature's growls and heavy footsteps chasing them. Jenna didn't dare look back. They burst through the front door and sprinted across the yard, not stopping until they reached the safety of their car. As Eric fumbled with the keys, Jenna dared a glance back at the house. The figure stood in the doorway, its eyes still glowing. But now there was something else. Another figure emerged from the shadows, this one smaller, leaner. Its eyes glowed too, but with a different hue, a cold, piercing yellow. Eric started the car, and they sped away, the farmhouse shrinking in the rearview mirror. Neither of them spoke until they were miles away. "What was that?" Jenna finally asked, her voice trembling. Eric's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "I don't know," he said. But whatever it wasn't human. Over the next few days, Jenna couldn't shake the experience. She spent hours researching the farmhouse, digging through old newspaper articles and online forums. What she found was more terrifying than she could have imagined. The farmhouse had a dark history. In the late 1800s, it had been the site of a series of brutal murders. The victims had all been drained of blood, their bodies covered in strange claw marks. Locals whispered about a curse on the land, about creatures that stalked the woods at night. Some spoke of vampires, others of werewolves. But no one could agree on what truly haunted the place. One account, however, stood out. It was a diary entry from a woman who had lived near the farmhouse in the 1920s. She wrote of seeing two shadows in the woods, one tall and monstrous, the other lithe and wolf-like. She described their eyes, one pair red, the other yellow. Jenna's blood ran cold as she read the words. It was exactly what she and Eric had seen. She shared her findings with Eric, who listened in grim silence. "So, what does this mean?" he asked when she finished. Jenna hesitated. "I think it means that whatever we saw, it's been there for a long time. And it's not going anywhere." Eric nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then we have to go back." Jenna stared at him, incredulous. "Are you insane? We barely made it out alive last time." "Exactly," Eric said. "If we don't figure out what's going on, who knows how many more people could get hurt?" Jenna wanted to argue, but deep down, she knew he was right. Whatever haunted that farmhouse, it was dangerous. And if there was a chance they could stop it, they had to try. They returned to the farmhouse a week later, armed with more than just flashlights. Eric had brought a hunting rifle, and Jenna carried a bag filled with salt, garlic, and silver, all the tools of folklore. The house was just as they had left it, its silence oppressive. As they stepped inside, Jenna felt that same charged energy in the air. This time, though, she was ready. They moved cautiously through the rooms, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. In the living room, Jenna's beam landed on a set of claw marks gouged deep into the wooden floor. Eric's flashlight illuminated a series of strange symbols carved into the walls, their meaning indecipherable. "This place is a nightmare," Jenna muttered. "It's more than that," Eric said. "It's a hunting ground." Before Jenna could respond, the growl came again. Low and menacing, it seemed to echo from every corner of the house. They spun around, their flashlights darting wildly. The red eyes appeared first, glowing in the darkness, like embers. Then came the yellow eyes, closer this time. The creatures stepped into the light, and Jenna's breath caught in her throat. The first was tall and gaunt, its skin pale, and its fangs glinting. The second was muscular and covered in fur, its claws razor-sharp. Vampire and werewolf. Predator and predator. Eric raised his rifle, but the vampire was faster. It moved with inhuman speed, knocking the gun from his hands. The werewolf lunged at Jenna, but she threw a handful of salt at it. The creature yelped and recoiled, snarling in fury.